Let's get a sense of exactly where we are, not just today, but look around the corner a little bit. What are the next turns in this crisis as far as we can discern them? We hear the Fed did something really good for the markets. At the same time, we also heard this week so many tenants, for example, not being able to pay their April rent.
I think what the Fed did is surely right for the short run. I think it's a mistake always to think that the provision of liquidity can override fundamentals and that lending money can fill fundamental gaps. We're having no revenue effectively for a large number of retail establishments. We're having no revenue for many landlords, residential landlords. We don't know how this is going to play out. Tenants aren't going to pay landlords. In many cases, Staples, for example, said not going to pay landlords at all. What about landlords? Landlords are all levered way up. Are they going to pay banks? If they don't pay banks, are banks going to be able to meet their liabilities given the depletion of their capital? How's that going to end? The Fed can make a lot of loans, and then somebody can decide where the seniority of those loans is relative to other claims. But a substantial part of this is surely going to end up back on taxpayers, and there may well be some very substantial uncertainties along the way. So I don't think this is resolving problems. This is postponing problems, and we're going to see how they get dealt with over time. I'm not sure what the answer is going to be.
As a practical matter, do we have to have a massive bankruptcy across the country? I mean, already bankruptcy lawyers are being called up left, right, and center because this is going to go through pretty much the entire economy, it feels like.
We're going to need a large amount of restructuring of debts, whether that's going to take place through bankruptcy, whether that's going to take place through negotiations in the shadow of possible bankruptcy, whether that's going to take place by the government taking on the debts and then forbearing on collection indefinitely. I don't know how that's going to work out, but there's going to need to be the mother of all debt workouts.
Right.
The kind of thing that we saw in the financial sector in 2008,
right,
we're going to be seeing over very large parts of the real economy, and that's going to bounce back into the financial sector.
Right.
So this mother of all workouts is going to play out for a substantial period of time, even if the recovery is as rapid as Rick Reeder hopes, and I'm not sure that's going to actually play out.
And Larry, what about the virus itself and our fight against the virus? We've had some encouraging signs, some initial encouraging signs. At the same time, people are really talking already about getting back to work. What is that process going to look like from your point of view?
Look, I think the grisly metaphor that's right for this is physical isolation is chemotherapy, and the goal is remission. And you can apply chemotherapy and you can achieve remission. The problem is that chemotherapy is toxic and increasingly toxic over time. And when you let up on the chemotherapy, you can lose the remission. The hope is that we're going to be able to let up on the physical isolation. And when we do that, we're going to put in some testing and some tracing of contacts, and then we're all going to be able to live in a pretty normal way. I hope that's the story prior to a vaccine, and that a vaccine comes fast. But I think we'll be doing very well if it's a year from now when we've got everybody vaccinated, and I think it's more likely to be 18 months from now, though I hope I'm wrong. And I think that if you look at the Asian success stories, they are a little less optimistic when probed closely. Singapore has already lost its remission and had to go to lockdown. No one really knows what the situation would be if you had externally observed and collected data in China. In Taiwan, which has been a success so far, they seem to have a essentially total remission. Every time you walk into an office building, they make you take your temperature and they make you apply hand sanitizer. The government's able to track everybody's movements, so that if a week ago you were in a restaurant at the same time that somebody who came down with the virus, you can be moved into quarantine immediately. Those are going to be challenging things to do in our country, and if we fall short, then we're at much more risk of relapse. So my guess is that it's going to be a little less freed up and back to normal when this current wave ends than people think, and that there's going to be a greater risk of rebound and back to lockdown and a kind of accordion dynamic till we get to the point where a vaccine or cure comes along. I hope I'm wrong, and it's certainly possible that I will be. Earlier, I thought that if the health situation was under control, you could have a fairly rapid recovery of the kind that you have when a resort town comes back for the summer. And I still think that's right. I just don't think it's relevant, because I think the virus is going to be a very substantial overhang until we get to the point where we have a vaccine. And so the question is going to be this remission chemotherapy dynamic, and we're going to be managing it at least for the next year.
And it puts a lot of pressure on the competence question that you've raised before. The question is whether we really are competent to do that.
It certainly does. It certainly does, David. And there's a lot of very good, very energetic, very capable work being done at the micro level on the ground in hospitals and communities all across the country. Whether there is that level of competence in the overall strategic planning, whether there could be, given the way we've allowed our public institutions to atrophy, is, I think, a very real question.